Love doesn't always die loudly. Sometimes it expires in the space between a dropped fork and the sound it makes hitting the floor. In our case, it died on a Tuesday evening in October, in the kitchen where I had once stood barefoot and pregnant, stirring pasta while he read business plans aloud from the living room. The refrigerator still hummed the same low note. The clock still read 6:47, but the air had changed density and I was breathing something heavier than I'd breathed before. This isn't fiction. This is how love disappears. One small truth at a time. The world. Before we met, when ambition still felt like optimism. David was 29, working in product management at a tech company that paid him enough to save, but not enough to dream. I was 27, 3 years into a career in marketing that I enjoyed without loving. We had separate apartments and intertwined weekends. We bought groceries together on Sunday mornings and split the bill down the middle. We were sensible people building a sensible life. The conversation that would later define everything happened on a Wednesday in April, 6 months after our wedding. We were sitting at our small kitchen table, the one we'd bought secondhand and refinished ourselves, and he said the company was offering voluntary severance packages. Good ones. Generous enough that he could take 8 months, maybe a year, to build the app he'd been sketching in notebooks for 3 years. The idea was solid, a platform connecting freelance tradespeople with homeowners, vetted and verified. He'd shown it to a few people. They'd been encouraging. "I want to do it," he said, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug I'd given him for Christmas. "But not if it means we're unstable." I was making $48,000 a year. He was making $72,000. Our rent was modest. We had no children. We could survive on my income alone if we were careful, if we stopped eating out, if we canceled the streaming services, if we accepted that vacations would wait. "Take the risk," I told him. "I'll keep us steady." He kissed me across the table, and I tasted gratitude. I didn't know then that this would be the last time I felt essential. The fracture, for the first 6 months, it worked. David turned our second bedroom into an office. He woke early, stayed up late, coded until his eyes burned red. I brought him sandwiches at noon and coffee at 3. We'd have dinner together, usually something simple, pasta or stir fry, and he'd tell me about his progress. I listened with the focus of someone whose contribution was invisible but necessary. I was the foundation. He was the building. I stopped buying new clothes, started bringing lunch to work in Tupperware. When my sister got engaged and planned a bachelorette weekend in Nashville, I said I couldn't afford it. She offered to pay my way, but pride has a price too. I stayed home. David worked with a co-founder he'd met through a startup incubator, a woman named Serena who had a background in UX design. They met twice a week at coffee shops, sometimes 3 times. He'd come home energized, talking about wireframes and user flows. I was happy he had a collaborator. I was too tired to be anything else. By month 8, investors started showing interest. David had pitch meetings. He bought a new shirt, slim fit, navy blue, from a store I no longer shopped at. I ironed it for him on a Tuesday morning while he showered. The steam rose between us like something trying to communicate. That evening, he came home late. Not dramatically late. Just 40 minutes past when he'd said. He smelled like cologne I hadn't noticed him putting on that morning and something else underneath it. Something floral and unfamiliar. "How did it go?" I asked from the couch, where I'd been reading the same page of a book for 20 minutes. "Good," he said, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. The sound was the same as always. Metal on ceramic, familiar, safe. "Really good, actually. They want a second meeting." "That's amazing," I said, and I meant it. He smiled, but he didn't sit beside me. He went to the kitchen for water. When he returned, he stayed standing. "Serena and I celebrated after. Just a drink. I should have texted." "It's fine," I said. And it was fine. It was fine the way a hairline crack in a windshield is fine, barely visible, easily ignored, until the temperature changes and it suddenly splits the glass in half. The unraveling, I started noticing things the way you notice pain after the anesthetic wears off, gradually, then all at once. His phone, which had always sat face up on the counter, now lived face down. He showered more frequently, changed his passcode from our wedding anniversary to something I didn't know. When I asked about it casually, "What's your new code?" he said he'd randomized it for security. "The incubator recommended it," he added, as if the incubator cared about his iPhone password. Receipts began appearing in his wallet. Coffee shops I'd never heard of. A wine bar downtown, twice, 3 times, then enough that I stopped counting. When I asked who he'd been with, he always said, "Serena." Always investor meetings that ran long. Always strategy sessions that required wine. I started checking our credit card statements. Not suspiciously, at least that's what I told myself, just to track our budget. We'd been careful for so long. Now there were charges I didn't recognize. A florist, a boutique hotel restaurant. He said the florist was for his mother's birthday, which had been in June and this was October. He said the restaurant was a client dinner, that Serena had recommended it. Serena. Her name appeared in conversation the way ghosts appear in photographs. Always in the background, always just visible enough to be undeniable. I Googled her one night while David slept. She was beautiful in the way women in tech are allowed to be beautiful. Polished, intelligent, smiling, conference photos with her arms crossed confidently. Her LinkedIn said she'd gone to Stanford. Her Instagram was private. I didn't sleep well that night, or the next, or the night after that. There was a coffee mug that became my compass. A gray ceramic mug with a chip on the rim that David had been using for years. Every morning I'd find it in the sink, rinsed but not washed. A faint trace of lipstick along the edge. Not my shade. Not my brand. I never asked about it. I just washed it and put it back in the cabinet. Then I'd find it again the next morning, marked the same way, the confrontation. The second pitch meeting was on a Thursday. David wore the navy shirt again. I'd stopped ironing it. He didn't seem to notice. "Big day," I said as he gathered his laptop bag. "Yeah." He was distracted, checking his phone. "Serena's picking me up. Her car's better for these things." "Right." He kissed my forehead, quick, reflexive, the way you'd touch a door frame while leaving. "Love you," he said. "Love you too." The door closed. I stood in the kitchen and counted to 60. Then I called in sick to work. I didn't plan what I did next. Or maybe I'd been planning it for weeks without admitting it. I opened his laptop. The password was still the same one we'd set up together 2 years ago. He'd never thought to change it. His email loaded immediately. I scrolled, searched Serena's name. There were investor emails, technical discussions, meeting recaps, and then, threaded between the professional, the personal, messages that started with strategy and ended with emojis I'd never seen him use. Messages about late nights and inside jokes. Messages that said, "Miss you," and "Can't wait to see you," and once, just once, "She doesn't understand this the way you do. She, me." I read for 2 hours. By the end, I understood that I'd been living in a house with someone who had slowly moved out without telling me. Emotionally, he'd been gone for months. I'd just been too busy keeping us stable to notice the architecture collapsing. When he came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table. The laptop was closed in front of me. The lights were off, except for the one above the stove. "Hey," he said too brightly. "We got the funding. They're committing $2 million. "Congratulations." He paused, heard something in my voice that made him stop moving. "What's wrong?" "How long?" "What?" "How long have you been sleeping with her?" Silence. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Somewhere in the building, someone dropped something heavy that echoed through the walls. He didn't deny it. That's what hurt most. He just stood there, keys still in his hand, looking at me with something that resembled pity. "It's not," he started. "Don't." He sat down across from me, put his keys on the table between us. The metal was cold and definitive. "I didn't plan it," he said quietly. "No one ever does." We were working late. It just happened. "When?" "July." 3 months ago. 3 months of me packing his lunches and washing that mug and believing I was part of something we were building together. "I was going to tell you," he said. "After everything settled, after the funding came through. So I could keep holding everything together until you didn't need me anymore." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. "Do you love her?" The pause before he spoke was longer than our entire marriage. "I don't know." I stood up. My legs felt uncertain, like I was relearning how to use them. "I need you to leave. It's my apartment, too." "You already left. You just forgot to pack." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Relief. He was relieved. He packed a bag that night, took enough for a week, said he'd stay with his brother. We both knew that was a lie. The door closed at 9:47 p.m. I stood in the kitchen until 10:30, staring at nothing, listening to the apartment breathe without him in it. The fallout. The funding was announced in TechCrunch 2 weeks later. David and Serena were photographed together at some launch event, holding champagne flutes, smiling like people who'd built something extraordinary. The article mentioned co-founders, and vision, and disruption. It did not mention that one of the co-founders had a wife at home who'd given up Nashville and new clothes and the luxury of optimism so he could take the risk. I didn't go to work for 3 days. When I finally did, I told my boss I'd had the flu. She looked at me with the expression of someone who'd heard that lie before and knew what it really meant. The apartment felt enormous. I'd never noticed how much space one person takes up until that space was empty. His half of the closet, his side of the bed, the second toothbrush holder. I didn't remove his things immediately. They stayed there like evidence of something that used to be true. I stopped cooking real meals, ate cereal for dinner, lost 7 pounds without trying. My mother called every few days and asked how I was doing, her voice heavy with the kind of concern that makes you lie automatically. "I'm fine," I'd say. "You don't sound fine." "I'm fine." I'd hang up and sit on the couch until the room got dark, until the streetlights came on outside, until I couldn't remember what day it was. David texted occasionally. Logistics mostly. Who owned what? How to split the lease. He was living with Serena now. He didn't say it explicitly, but I could read it in the gaps between his words. One night, he asked if we could talk. Actually talk. I said no. Then I said yes. Then I said I'd think about it, and never responded. I thought about it anyway. The reckoning, late at night. When sleep wouldn't come, I'd replay our marriage like a film I'd seen before, but hadn't understood the first time. Scenes that once seemed innocent now revealed themselves as something else entirely. The evening he came home smelling unfamiliar, that hadn't been the first time. It had just been the first time I'd noticed. The changed passcode. That wasn't about security. It was about privacy from me. The coffee mug with the lipstick stain. She'd been in our apartment, while I was at work, drinking coffee from our cabinet, sitting at our table. How long had I been performing the role of wife while he auditioned someone else for the part? I wondered if love could exist alongside betrayal. If the moments we'd shared, the Sunday groceries, the refinished table, the night he kissed me and tasted like gratitude, if any of that had been real, or if it had all been prologue to this. I wondered if I should have seen it coming, if there were signs I missed because I was too busy being steady, if my reliability had made me invisible. I wondered if he'd ever loved me the way I'd loved him, or if I'd just been convenient until someone more exciting came along. Some nights, I hated him. Some nights, I hated myself. Most nights, I just felt tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. My sister called and asked if I wanted to visit. I said no. She said she was coming anyway. She arrived on a Saturday morning with bagels and orange juice and sat across from me at the refinished table and didn't say anything for 20 minutes. Then she said, "You gave up a lot for him." "I know. He didn't deserve it." "I know that too." "Do you?" I didn't answer, because the truth was more complicated than deserving. I'd made choices. I'd said take the risk. I'd believed that sacrifice was the same as partnership. I'd thought that love meant holding someone steady while they reached for something higher. I hadn't realized they might reach right past me, the legacy. We signed the divorce papers on a Wednesday in February. David met me at a coffee shop downtown, not one of the ones on the receipts, thankfully. He looked good, rested, happy in a way I hadn't seen in our last year together. He tried to make small talk, asked how I was doing. I said fine. He said he was sorry for how everything happened. I said it didn't matter anymore. That was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that helps conversations end. He told me the company was doing well, that they'd just closed another funding round, that Inc. magazine was doing a feature. He didn't mention Serena, but she was present anyway. In his new watch, his clear eyes, his easy comfort in his own skin. "I want you to know," he said as we stood to leave, "that what you did, supporting me, believing in me, it mattered. I couldn't have done any of this without you." I looked at him then, really looked, and saw that he meant it, that in his version of events, I was the noble sacrifice. The foundation he'd built his empire on, the wife who understood that great things require great risks and greater support. In his story, I was the hero. In mine, I was the fool. "I'm glad it worked out," I said. We hugged briefly, the kind of hug you give distant relatives at funerals. Then he left and I sat back, down and ordered another coffee I didn't need just to have a reason to stay in public a little longer. 6 months later, I saw the Inked feature. It was shared on LinkedIn by someone from my old company. The headline read, "How Two Entrepreneurs Disrupted Home Services and Found Love Along the Way." There was a photo of them in their office, leaning against a desk, arms around each other, looking at the camera with the confidence of people who'd never questioned whether they deserved their happiness. The article mentioned David's background, his vision, his risk. It mentioned Serena's design expertise, her Stanford degree, her belief in the mission from the very start. It did not mention me. I closed my laptop and sat very still, waiting for the rage or the grief or whatever I was supposed to feel. But nothing came, just a quiet understanding that some stories get told and others don't. That history is written by whoever has the better narrative. That I'd been erased not maliciously, but simply because my part, the steady part, the holding part, the staying home so he could take, the risk part, wasn't interesting enough to include. I'd gone back to work full-time, got a promotion, rented a smaller, cheaper apartment where the refrigerator hummed a different note, started seeing a therapist who asked if I'd forgiven him. I said I was working on it. She said forgiveness wasn't a requirement for healing. That felt like permission. On good days, I believed I'd rebuild, that I'd find someone who saw steadiness as strength rather than background scenery, that I'd learn to risk things myself instead of just holding others steady while they did. On bad days, I thought about the gray mug with the chipped rim, how I'd washed it every morning, never asking, never confronting, just quietly erasing the evidence that something was wrong. I threw it away eventually. It felt symbolic in a way that embarrassed me, but I did it anyway. The final truth, sometimes I drive past their office. It's downtown, in one of those renovated buildings with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. From the street, you can see people working inside, moving with purpose, building something that matters. I don't stop. Don't look for too long, just notice it's there and keep driving. People ask if I regret it, the sacrifice, the staying home, the enabling of his dream, while mine stayed theoretical. The answer isn't simple. I regret how it ended. I regret that I confused unsupport with disappearing. I regret that I believed love meant making myself smaller so someone else could grow larger. But I don't regret the person I was when I said, take the risk. She was kind. She was generous. She believed that partnership meant choosing each other's success over your own comfort. She just didn't realize that not everyone believes the same thing. The reward wasn't shared, but the lesson was learned, and that's not nothing. I keep the refinished table. It sits in my new apartment, smaller, but mine, scratched from moves, but still solid. Sometimes I run my fingers along the edge where we sanded it together, and I can almost remember what it felt like to build something with someone and believe it would last. Love didn't disappear all at once. It left slowly, politely, the way guests leave parties, with promises to stay in touch that everyone knows are lies. What remains is simpler. I know now that I can hold myself steady, that I don't need to be someone's foundation to have worth, that the capacity to sacrifice isn't the same as the obligation to sacrifice endlessly. I know that some people leave and some people stay, and sometimes the people who leave are the ones we held most carefully. I know that truth arrives late, but always arrives. And I know that next time, if there is a next time, I'll ask one question before I offer anything. What happens to me when you succeed? The answer will tell me everything.